Welcome. My name is Rob Lesan. I am a senior solutions architect with XYPRO Technology Corporation. Um, we are a nonstop security solutions provider for nonstop systems. Welcome to this session today. We're going to talk about keystroke logging on the nonstop. Uh, there's a lot to cover here. I'm going to talk about our specific solution. Uh, if you are an existing customer or a prospective customer, or even curious about any of this, feel free to ask me any questions anytime. Obviously not during the presentation, but when we get to the end. Um, so let's talk about XYPRO. Let's start with my company. We've been an HPE partner since 1983. We're headquartered in Southern California, just outside of Los Angeles, in a little town called Simi Valley. Excuse me. We are security experts on the nonstop. We also do a lot of database management and compliance for nonstop servers. If you have any needs in that area that aren't currently being met, by all means, reach out to our sales team. We are a globally based company. We have support services that cross the globe. We have a presence in Europe, a presence in Asia and the Pacific, and of course our home office in Southern California, as well as support staff and individuals spread across the United States. We have a strong partnership with HPE. We have a number of products on the price book. We also have a number of products that are included with every nonstop server, to include our user authentication and merged audit products. Those are included at no extra cost to you if you have a nonstop server. If you ever have any questions about configuring or installing or using any of the products that are included with the nonstop, feel free to reach out to us. We're always here to help. We're the only SailPoint and CyberArk certified integration partners for nonstop. If you're not familiar with SailPoint or CyberArk, SailPoint is an identity management, enterprise identity management function that allows you to provision and deprovision users across many platforms. That now includes the nonstop. Excuse me, and of course, CyberArk is the premier password vaulting solution and privilege escalation management utility that now directly interfaces to our access control product and does all kinds of great nonstop stuff. That last bullet there is about our Security One product. If you haven't heard of it, if you haven't seen it, by all means reach out and get a demo. It is a lot like a SIM, like Splunk or QRadar or something like that, but it's contextualized for the nonstop. It's really a nice product. It will reduce your security footprint and your time to discover when it comes to incidents and things like that, and it makes security management on the nonstop just so much easier for an enterprise. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. So let's move on. Excuse me. We are a very trusted security partner in the nonstop space. Now we're trying to expand our footprint into other platforms with things like Security One and all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, we're trying to make sure that the nonstop integrates with the rest of the enterprise. The nonstop for decades has been that black box that sits in the corner. It operates really well. It doesn't have any issues. It's always available and things like that, but it's alien to most. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the nonstop, it looks like any other platform to any other individual and can be managed as such. Excuse me. So we're trying to modernize everything. We are leveraging our strategic technology partnerships with people with companies like CyberArk and SailPoint and things like that. We have a worldwide customer base. Our support is 7x24, just like HPE's and everyone else. And we have fluency in 24 different languages. If you need native support for the nonstop with a security solution from one of our products, reach out to us. If we don't have someone who supports your language natively, chances are we can find somebody. So you can see here by our map where we have people stationed to help. So we really do have 7x24 support no matter where you are in the world or what your issue might be, as long as it's with nonstop security. I can't stress that enough. As nonstop people, we tend to be jacks of all trades, but we are actually specialists in nonstop security. There's very little we have not seen in our time, and we've got vast experience in creating and crafting and supporting nonstop security solutions. So give us a call if you need anything. So we are working closely with Microsoft with Active Directory authentication. ServiceNow is a ticketing system that we are interfacing with our access control product. If you need more details on things like that, by all means, reach out to us. I already talked about CyberArk a little bit. We do authentication, multi-factor authentication with RSA. We have some application authentication and some log inception and management with ACI's base 24 or base 24 EPS products. Of course, we're a huge HPE enterprise partner, and we always have been and always will be. We've done extensive work with Micro Focus of the data protection arena, and of course, we are SailPoint certified, which we mentioned earlier. And we do tend to work a lot with IBM partners when it comes to things like QRadar, Connect Direct, things like that. So these are just a few of the companies that we play with on a daily basis, and we've gotten quite proficiently with. So once again, if you need to interface to some of these platforms or use some of these things with your NonStop, let us know. So let's get down to it. Let's talk about keystroke logging. Keystroke logging, as you can see, is key logging, keyboard capturing, whatever you want to call it. It's when we capture the input that a user provides to the NonStop, right? So, excuse me, key logging or keystroke capture tends to get kind of a negative vibe or a negative reputation in the industry, because when people say key loggers and things like that, they tend to think of hackers and people trying to manipulate things or capture your sensitive data. That's not what it's about when it comes to the mainframe environment. When it comes to enterprise systems like the NonStop, the mainframe, and things like that, we are all about capturing that data for beneficial purposes, whether that be compliance, monitoring and alerting, or investigations, investigative purposes. And none of these is really a negative, right? So real-time monitoring, we can capture things before they get too terribly bad. After the fact investigation, a lot of that is non-repudiation, right? We can prove definitively that an individual did not do something that happened at a certain time. And this is always a positive. A lot of our investigations, we tend to find out that something happened by accident, or something happened in a batch job, or something like that. So things like keystroke logging can actually alleviate pressure or prove someone did not do something that was considered to be a negative, right? And of course, if you have a need to be compliant with PCI or SOX or HIPAA or some of the other frameworks, and there's a ton of them out there, you probably need to capture things like what PCI says. They call it they need to record the actions of anyone with administrative access to the cardholder environment. So you can change that to PII environment, sensitive data environment, whatever you want to call it. A lot of requirements say we need to record the actions of individuals in these environments. That means super. That means your security administrators. That means your operators. That means your application administrators, your database administrators. Almost anybody that has access to a system like the NonStop may have some sort of access to private or personal data, and we need to make sure that we capture the keystrokes and their activities while they're on the host. Like I said, most of the time, this is simply to keep an auditor happy or your system in balance, as opposed to pointing a finger at someone or trying to prove a negative. Most of the time, like I said, we're out to prove a positive. So worry about these things, care about them, absolutely. They're all good things. And very rarely does anything negative come out of the ability to log keystrokes. So how is that keystroke log data used? So more often than not, it's sent to an automated system where nobody actually looks at it unless they have to. If you're capturing input from 40, 50, 60 users all day, every day, nobody has time to flip through that and see how many misspellings you made or how many errors you did or anything like that. The whole point of this is to send this stuff to automated systems for review. We can set up scripts or triggers or automated things that look for keywords: purge, drop, delete, alter. add user, delete user, password, things like that. Some of those things need to be captured and logged and noted, not necessarily good or bad, just for fact. The other side of that too is real-time alerts. You have, like I said, 40 or 50 users on the system at any given time. They're doing their jobs, and sometimes something inadvertent may happen. Someone may have access to something they're not supposed to. Someone may try to get access to something they're not supposed to. And that's where the real-time alerts come in. If you can capture these activities as they're happening, good or bad, and then trigger on them, good things and bad things may happen, right? I can use a real-world example of a system I worked on myself earlier in my career. Excuse me. I was working on a NonStop system. I was working with a coworker. I thought I was on development, and I started to manage the database. I went into a specific location. I started to purge data and drop tables when one of the administrators in our environment came over to me and said, "Stop what you're doing immediately." He says, "You're on the wrong system and you're about to cause critical problems in our production environment." I said, "What?" I said, I could have sworn I was on development, but I had systemed over at some point to look at some production data, and I had not systemed back. He just happened to be watching the logs in real time as this was happening, and he caught me about ready to drop production data. It would have been horribly terrible for the enterprise and probably damaging to the business had he not seen it. Now, this was a lucky instance. He just happened to be watching what I was doing at the time. But if he had had something like Zygate access control and merged audit, pushing those alerts out in real time, he would have caught me even earlier. It was nothing I did intentionally. It wasn't, I had no malice to me. I just happened to make a mistake. So real-time alerts and things like that are good to have, right? So if someone's trying to switch users, if someone's trying to do something they either shouldn't be, willingly or unwillingly or knowingly or unknowingly, you can catch that stuff in real time as it occurs. Do your users know? Is it necessary to alert everybody that keystroke logging is happening? Well, I suppose that depends on your line of business, your country of business, your local laws and requirements. But the fact of the matter is if you put up something like a banner similar to this one, users will know. They probably forget over time, but that highlighted row says that by accessing the system, you expressly agree that your actions may be monitored. And that, I'm using a very expensive NonStop server at my employer's office. There is no reason that I can think of that I should not understand that my employer or whatever customer I'm working at or wherever wants to know what's going on their system. These machines aren't cheap. They are usually very, very critical to the business, and the enterprise has every right to know what's going on that system at any given time. We do this on the NonStop because that's where the data is stored. That's where the critical operations happen. I don't care that you're reading your email in the background. I don't care that you're on Facebook, anything like that. What we do care about is what happens on that NonStop server. So hopefully you have a banner like this that informs users that they are being monitored or the possibility of monitoring is going on. And it's just nice to know. After the first couple of days, people get over it. They don't care. They don't notice. They don't worry about it because the solution is so lightweight and so non-interfering that they'll start clicking through this like they do every other end user license agreement under the sun. So put one of these up, remind people that they're being monitored. And again, I do my job day in, day out, each day, every day, excuse me, without thinking twice about the fact that my system is being monitored. But like I said, it never hurts to let people know. So the XYPRO solution to keystroke logging is our access control module. We call it XAC, Zygate Access Control. Zygate Access Control, XAC, has a lot of functionality, but one of the things that we've seen enterprises latch onto this subsystem for specifically is keystroke logging. It does many other things like privilege escalation management and subsystem control and things like that. But one of the biggest consumers and sellers of this product is its ability to do keystroke logging transparently. Like I said before, we have anywhere from 20 to 60 people on each of our NonStop servers each and every day. We log every keystroke of every user on every system. And you cannot see a significant resource consumption from access control during the day. You just can't. The keystroke logging is so lightweight and transparent to the users that they most of the time have no idea that it's there. The second bullet says it's transparent to users. It really is. This happens in OSS and in Guardian and doesn't have any negative impact at all. It's barely measurable, even using system utilities. It can be implemented at a granular level. We can do it on a user by user basis. We can do it on specific commands. We can do it as a service. So you can put it under Telnet, SSH, and SSL, or we can make it system wide so that anybody who types anything from a tackle prompt or an OSS prompt is going to get audited. And I'll have examples of all this coming up. XAC by default captures input. You cannot disable that. Capture of output is optional, but input is always captured. So if you are under a keystroke logged session, your input will absolutely be recorded. That's block mode or conversational mode. I'll talk about capturing output in a little while. We do it, like I said, in both block and conversational mode. And the block mode input looks a little odd, but it's absolutely necessary. XAC can capture the contents of an obey file. One of the issues that we have, and I'll get into this in a little detail later, is an obey file is just a command file. Because you're not actually typing those commands at a prompt, they may get missed by many a keylogger. So if your keylogging solution currently does not understand the NonStop, if it does video, or if it's on a jump host or anything like that, there's no way under the sun they're going to capture the contents of an obey file. Only something that happens natively on the NonStop host has the ability to do that. And of course, because this is a Zygate module, it interfaces seamlessly into our merged audit infrastructure for reporting, alerting, and of course, our Security One infrastructure as well for advanced analytics and machine learning and security intelligence. We'll talk about both of those here in a few minutes as well. We've noticed, there was a study I was paying attention to a couple years ago that says if the perception of annoyance for an individual working on something is about half a second. If your solution impacts that user by more than half a second at every single operation, they're going to get annoyed, they're going to notice, and they're going to complain. Using XAC for keystroke logging does not impose any delay or any lag whatsoever. Like I said, I've used this for a very long time, and there have been no negative impacts or uses at all. If you don't believe me, get a demo copy of this and try it. I'll set it up for you. You'll be amazed. The solution, again, must be transparent to users and systems operations for stability, right? So if you have 50 users on the system, all being keystroke logged, and it's having negative impact on performance or stability, then you're going to have problems. XAC has none of these issues. We've tested it with hundreds of concurrent users. It's been in the market for over 30 years with a lot of customers using it. It has no perceptible system overhead. Like I said, if you want to get down to the nitty gritty, we can measure the microseconds it uses to record the data, but there really is no load. And it logs directly to an nscribe entry sequenced table or file for performance reasons. Now all that data goes in there, and like I said, XAC manages its own logs. XAC can interface directly to merged audit, so all that data can be consumed and processed in real time on or off the host. And we include things like full DDL and all kinds of ways to report on that data should you choose to. Again, if you're using merged audit or Security One, you don't have to worry about reporting all that stuff because it's already built in. So granular implementation, like I said earlier, we can do some, none, or all. Keystrokes, commands, users, whatever you want to do. So XAC can be configured to capture data from individual commands, If you're familiar with the access control product, we use it a lot for privilege escalation. So if you want to give somebody the ability to purge a file or run SCF or something like that as a different user, we can configure a command, and we would call it XAC space and a command name. And in this instance, the FUP255 gives the user, if they have access, the ability to run FUP as super. Now, everything they do while they're in that command is going to be audited. Now, we might give them a single command, or we might give them a copy of FUP that's running a super, and everything they do in that session is going to be logged, all their input. So if they're purging things, if they're creating tables, if they're copying data, it's all going to be recorded. So one level higher than that is the session level. So if I say that anybody coming in through Zoller's ZTC0 on Telnet service ZTN0, and they're in the group, the operations group, their sessions will automatically be audited. Or if they come in and they log on as someone in the super group, or if they log on to the database group through SSH or something like that, we can control that. We can say that we have 17 SSH processes and 16 of them are audited and one is not. I don't know why you would do that, but there's probably a need. We can do the same thing with Telnet or SSL. The last option is what I personally recommend, is you do it system-wide. You enable keystroke logging on every connection, whether it be Telnet, SSL, or SSH via OSS or Guardian, and you simply record everything everyone types on the host. Like I said, there are probably scenarios or situations where you don't want to do that, and that can be configured. But in my career, I have seen very few instances where you don't want that to happen. And again, there's exceptions to every rule. But again, this is a very expensive system, and it's probably got a very dedicated purpose in your enterprise. Record everything. If you don't need it, it's just text, and it eats up very, very little space. But can capture all that stuff and keep it. You never know when you're going to need to go back 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months to find out what exactly happened on terminal session X by user Y. Excuse me. Once you have these logs, you can look back for whatever you need to. I happen to use this periodically to go back and do things like status reports and major accomplishments documentation, because I have every keystroke I've ever typed on the NonStop. I've even used it for source code recovery. So you can capture input and or output. So you can log only what is necessary. Like I said, you can do this for certain users. You can do it at certain times of day. You can do it on certain kinds of connections. Resources on the NonStop being what they are, there really is no realistic reason not to log everyone, but I'll stop beating that topic. We give you the ability to filter out password entries or any sort of regular expression that you would like to exclude. One of the capabilities that XAC has always had is the ability to say blank password. If a user types the word password, the characters following the word password will be blanked out in the log. This way, if you're changing your password from a tackle prompt or doing something else, it will not get logged, at least not to a usable point, right? The other one that we built in a few years ago was the ability to filter on a regular expression. So if you have customer service agents or people typing in sensitive data into block mode screens or in conversational mode, let's say you're searching for a specific credit card value or someone's home address, we can build regular expressions that will say, if this a string that meets this criteria comes along, do not log. So the before and after will get logged, and the string itself will be replaced with X's in your log. I said this earlier, input will always be captured. This is just what XAC does. The whole point is input character keystroke logging. So we always capture input. Again, you can limit the amount of output you can capture. The default, there is no default. You have to say enable output, and then you have to give it a number of lines. The maximum is 32,000, and that's per input. So if I do fup info $system.a.star, I'm going to get 400 lines. If I do it again and I say info dollar star dot star dot star, I'm going to get another 32,000 lines or whatever I have the maximum set to. We have found over time that you don't necessarily or often need all of the output from a command. If someone does a fup purge $data.rob.star, I only need to see the first 2 or 3 lines to know that the operation was successful. So we don't need to capture everything that comes out of a session. We just need to know that the damage was done or that the command was successful. And that's why output limits are probably a smart thing. The only real, concern here is disk space. And the only time you're going to run out of disk space is if somebody does a fup info star 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 comma detail over and over and over and over and over. And I mean millions of times in short order. Even at that, if you're capturing the data and sending it off host, you can run out of disk space on the nonstop. It's not going to matter. Those keystrokes are still being sent somewhere else. But consider capturing, if you really need output, consider capturing a subset. The first 5 lines, the first 10 lines, something like that. Don't set it out to 32,000 lines. You just don't need that kind of output. But your mileage will and may vary, and we're happy to configure that to whatever you need. So I brought this up earlier. There are 2 screen modes on the nonstop, at least that I'm aware of. There's conversational mode and there's block mode. Block mode, once again, is not going to be captured by something that doesn't understand the nonstop. Right? So even if you have a 3270 emulator or something like that, all you're going to get are screen captures. You're probably not going to get function keys. You're not going to get detailed input on where your cursor was on the screen and things like that. XAC has the ability to capture all that. So on the first line, you'll see in conversational mode, I did a fup info $system.star.star where mod time is greater than 1 March. That's easy, and I hit enter, and that's what ended up in the log. Well, the second section there is me going into TEdit and editing a file. So you'll see where on the screen my cursor was, what I typed. The ENT is me hitting the enter key, the F1 is the F1 key, and once again you see me typing foo and then bar and then enter, and then I exited after that. But this is just an example, and I'll show you some real world copies of this coming up. Once again, block mode is kind of important, especially on older nonstop servers where we still have things like pathway terminals and classic block mode applications. There's a lot that happens in block mode on the nonstop, and we want that input. The output's not always easy to interpret, but at least you have it. And again, you'll know the screen location and the text that was entered. Contents of obey files. If you're not a nonstop native, the easiest way to explain obey files is it's just a command file. If you were going to type file info and then time and then spoolcom, delete all my jobs, and then you were going to volume to somewhere else and you were going to do something else and you do the same thing all the time, you can put those commands into what's called an obey file and simply run it. And the obey file will execute your commands exactly as if you were typing them. The kicker here is because there's no keyboard input, that will not get captured by most solutions. If I have one command file that does 1,000 nasty things, you're only going to see with many things, especially things like terminal emulator capture and stuff like that, you're only going to see someone typing obey and a file name. The contents of that file could do anything. You might never see it. You might never know what's happening. You might not care. But what's going to happen here is XAC is going to capture the contents of that obey file and write them out as if you typed them. This is a good thing. You want this. You want to capture that input. You want to know what's going on in that obey file. It's important. Obviously, if you put something in an obey file, this could be used for negative purposes. It could be positive. But either way, you want to capture those operations. XAC has seamless integration. It's a Zygate module. All Zygate modules work together extremely well, and they're tightly integrated into the operational environment. So XAC is a Zygate module, so it's going to support merged audit. Merged audit can consume the logs from XAC in real time and do whatever you want to them. send that data to XS1. It can trigger macros and routines. It can report. It can send the data off to a SIM. We are, once again, very, very familiar with Splunk, the Elk Stack, QRadar, all of the major SIMs out there. We write to them all the time. The data is, once again, sent off the NonStop for processing, alerting, cataloging, analysis, whatever, in real time. And of course, we include DDL for you to write your own reports, whether that be through Nform, through any reporting tools you have, or whatever you want to do with it. Everything goes, like I said, into an NScribe entry sequenced object for you to consume at your will. And again, you don't have to know anything about this stuff. We can include complete reporting capabilities and export utilities. So all that data is there for you to do with as you wish. I've got some reporting examples here. This might look like kind of a eye chart to most of you, but I'm going to include this text here so that if you get a copy of these slides or want to know how to do any of the reporting we do, all you have to do is ask. This is a simple SQL MP query that runs against the merged audit database that gives you a keystroke log report for the previous day. You don't have to know anything about SQL MP to run these. Once again, I'm happy to share them with anybody who wants. But in the meantime, if you know what you're doing, you can grab this. If you don't know what you're doing, you can grab it anyways and run it anyways. This is what it looks like when you input it, and let me show you what it looks like when you output it. Let me find out what the file is. Oh, snappy. I called it KLREP2A. That's the one I just did. You can tell by the timestamp here. This is going to be a report of, whoops. This leverages the Zygate MA database. So I need my defines loaded. So this is a keystroke report for my activity from yesterday on one system. Once again, you'll notice it doesn't take very long. And my utilization alone was 10,425 lines for one day. Now, don't get me wrong, I am kind of an active typer. So let's see what it looks like. So here is my keyboard input. You'll notice the header on here has the date and time that I ran it, my IP address, and my terminal on the NonStop. All this is logged. So here's, what did I figure? This thing's 175 pages. There's page 1. Here's page 90. Here's me going through and doing a bunch of edits. And this is input and output. You'll notice by the timestamps here, these are not very far apart. This is me doing a bunch of searches. Here's me doing block mode input. So you'll notice I said edit. I did an XVS, then I hit function key F16, and then I started doing things. Actually, F16 gets me out, but here's everything I typed while I was in here. And here's, oh, look, here's me doing some activities in OSS. You can tell because of the command types. It says all kinds of stuff here. So again, we pull in data from Guardian or OSS. We don't care. Here again is my new terminal ID, my IP address, and the time. All of this is logged. All of this is happening all the time. And I can show you that here. Well, I'll show you in a second. But again, we're happy to share our reporting capabilities and functionality with you. Merged audit and access control come with their own reporting functions, so you don't have to know how to do any of this automatically. Here's the other reporting example. This one is static. This is just a query. This is me subscribing to the merged audit database and pulling up the keystrokes in real time. So if you'll notice here, this is my OSS session where I'm running SQL MX, and you'll see, look, here are the keystrokes from my session. So I can go over here. Let's pull this across. So let's put this down here. You can see me type in real time. FUP info star. There's the command right there, FUP info star. See time. Of course, the time is 15:57:03, 15:57:03. Rob was here. See, everything gets captured as it happens. Anything I do. And only the input. We're only, on this session, we're only recording my input, not my output. So whatever I type is going to get recorded, whether it's valid or not. If I hit enter, it's going to get recorded. Now, if I hit a function key, you'll notice that that was recorded as well. Function key F3, I have viewpoint running, or viewpoint running in the background, so you get to see that. There's me exiting. Oops, I hit an inactive key. There's me hitting Shift F16. There's me hitting F3 again. So you can see all this stuff happening in real time in the logs. I like to turn this on and watch my own keystrokes in the background, but I could be watching anybody on the machine because I have access to read all those logs. So the other side of that is let's say I went in and I did something else. So I did XAC tackle 255. We have XAC instrumented so that if I'm going to elevate privilege, it requires me to type in my password. So I am now logged on as super from my session. And again, as I do things down here, this time, because I'm in as a sensitive user ID, my input and my output are being captured. So you get my input, and then you get my output as well, because whoever configured this command wants to know exactly what I'm doing all the time. And I don't have a problem with that. This is critical stuff. I'm logged on as a sensitive user, so somebody wants to know what I'm doing. So if I was going to do a license or other activity, somebody would know. So we need to know these things. And again, this time I'm capturing input and output because I'm on as a sensitive user. So now I'm back as myself and only input is being captured. So this is made possible by the fact that the merged audit database is audited and SQLMX has publish subscribe. So I'm leveraging that on the NonStop to see my data in real time. I could have done it via Splunk or XS1 as well. So here's where it comes down to. Here's how to add keystroke logging to any session. So Telnet's easy, and SSL over Telnet is the same thing. So by default, the system comes with a service called Tackle. If you go into SCF, you can see these things. I'm just a standard user. Let's do this first. I need to see what telserf processes are running. So I'm going to go ZTN0, which is our default. And then I can do SCF info proc. Let's do info service in 0.star. What services do we have out there? Okay, so we have the following services. The ones that start with a Z are HP services. I'm not even going to talk about those. These are the standards, right? Tackle comes with the system. This is normally $system.sys.nn.tackle or $system.system.tackle. We have changed it so that it's set up for keystroke logging. Here's the only thing we did. This line right here shows you what we've done. If you have access to SCF, and I'm assuming your system administrator would do this, not just anybody, you can set this up. All we're going to do is change the program, the standard program, to Zygate AC, and then we're going to tell it which program to run. Now I can do an XAC help to find out what that command looks like. You don't need to know this very often, right? This is one of those things you need to know when you're setting it up. You don't really need to know much else. I have the commands in this presentation. They're also in the default configuration for access control. All you have to do is go out there and activate them. So tackle dynamic IP is this command. You don't need to know what it does. I can get into details if anybody ever has any questions, but basically this starts a tackle. And if you'll notice, okay, this one does not log output, so it doesn't have anything on it. Oh, but it does have block mode audit turned on. So I have that outlined as well. So if you don't want to update the default tackle service, you can add a separate service. In this case, I called it tackle aud. It says display on, type conversational, subtype dynamic, so that a new copy pops up every time for every user. Everyone gets to access it. Once again, the program is Zygate AC, and the parameter is the same. It's that tackle dynamic IP. If you want users audited coming through something like outside view like this into OSS, you need to add a service for OSS as well. So if I connect to the host using Telnet, and again, this is over SSL, I get a menu, right? Remember, we talked about this one earlier. But then I get offered these services. I just showed you what tackle looks like. Now I'm going to say AUD OSS in this case. This is an OSS session. So I am now in OSS. Whoops. I have another copy of LS running. But you'll notice I'm in OSS. Everything looks great. I like doing this kind of stuff. And let's go look. Oh, look, my keystrokes are being logged over here as well. I am in OSS now. And here it is. Keystroke logged. You'll notice my terminal ID has changed, but I'm still logging. So I just logged out, problem solved. That is an SSL session over Telnet into OSS. So I'm still being logged. Works great, lasts a long time, everybody loves it. So let's take a look at what that command looks like. Actually, I have them both in the presentation. I don't need to show you here. But this time I'm saying an audited OSS session, same kind of stuff, but in this case, my command that I'm giving to XAC is an OSS shell. Here's what the entries look like in the access control list for XAC. You don't have to memorize these. You don't have to know them. They're included in the Zygate access control product. I put them here as examples in case anybody wants to see them, read them, or ask questions about them later. Once again, I have blank password is set to true, and I have block mode audit set to on, right? So the rest of this stuff you may or may not understand. Start logged off, the access control list, everything in here. These are all configured for optimum use in my environment. That may not be yours. Here's what the OSS session looks like. It's noticeably shorter. OSS does not have the same kind of features and functions that Tackle does, so the configuration is a little simpler. Once again, if you get ready to implement these, ask me, let me know, because some of these settings are different for OSS than they are for Guardian. Right? And there's a reason for those. Please don't change them unless you know what you're doing. So if you're going to add keystroke logging to SSH, it's a little more complicated. So under Telnet and SSL, we only have the Telnet server. There's really nothing else to worry about. With SSH, we have an SSH transport, and then we have a terminal server that's called STN. To get keystroke logging to work properly under SSH, we have to configure both. The first thing you need to do is go into your STN and add a service there, the same way we did under Telnet in the regular session and for SSL. So STN-COM handles the same kind of thing for SSH. So STN-COM is here. Oops, there it is. This is where it runs from. So I'm going to say, oh, let's find out which term servers we have. STN. So I have two. I have the default ZPTY, and I have one that we use for TCP/IP v6. We're going to look at the standard one here. So I'm going to say info service. So Tackle is the default service. I find it very difficult to remove that or update it because SSH, if I'm connected via SSH natively, then that service is in use and I cannot modify it. What I recommend you do is you add a separate service for your audited Tackle sessions. Once again, the program is going to be Zygate AC, and this time we're going to say Tackle Dynamic IP SSH. The one we use for Telserve is just Tackle Dynamic IP. For SSH, we have some different parameters, so we need to set up a separate one. I have one here for OSS that we'll talk about in just a moment. So Tackle Dynamic IP SSH, this is my audited Tackle service. You'll notice here that I say add service, Tackle aud, type dynamic, program XAC, log on required. SSH runs as super. You need to have this parameter in there to make this work. And then of course, param is the name of the command we're going to run to XAC to actually give us a tackle. Here's the OSS service, almost exactly the same. The difference is the parameter. So we're going to give it a different name and a different command in XAC. So you'll see both of these here. They're easy to add. Now, one thing I have to mention is if this process dies, that configuration goes away. Make sure you have your configuration stored in a file somewhere, because if $ZPTY recycles for any reason, CPU down, someone stops it, cold load, whatever, that configuration is going to be lost. My recommendation is that you set it up as a persistent process. If you'll notice in our environment, we have it set that way. Info proc SSH ZPT, I think that's what it's called. Oops. Let's do this. Oh, no wonder, I'm in the wrong subsystem. That's probably why. See, look, there it is. So this is the STN. Here's the name of the process. Now let me show you the config. Ours works consistently because we have the configuration stored in a file. So anytime this process stops, $ZPTY stops for any reason, it's going to get restarted with this configuration. Let's go see what's in that config file. My system administrator set this up so that we always get the same set of services. Here we go. So when that STN service restarts, the services are always re-added. Now let me show you what it looks like when I log on with an SSH session. So here's my host. Bam. I have keys set up, so I drop directly into a session. There's that banner I talked about earlier. I'm logged onto the system willy-nilly, and of course, once again, here's my keystrokes. Here's my keystrokes right here. And that is because this session is set up by default for keystroke logging. So I only went halfway through here. We added a service. You also have to go into SSH.com and tell SSH which services I'm going to use by default. So to do that, once again, I have to go back here. I have to escalate. I don't have access to SSH.com as myself. So I am once again super. Let's find out which SSH. I know for a fact which SSH I'm on. So I do an info user on myself. And what works for me is the fact that I have this set. Tackle aud. You'll notice that that is the name of the service right here. Now on the slide, I said add service tackle aud. Tackle aud is my default service, and I am forced to use it through SSH. When my user ID connects, and my CI program is what happens when I'm using a 6530 emulator, it forces me through that tackle aud service. Now I also happen to have SSH keys set up so that I don't have to use my password every time I log on. This only works from my workstation and only in my environment, but I have it configured that way. Now for OSS, I have this set up. The same kind of thing. Once again, OSS aud is the service. So when I come in using an OSS or a VT100 emulator, this is same kind of thing happens. So the emulator already put my name in. So I'm going to say me again in OSS. And guess what? There's my keystrokes. Again, different terminal ID. Here's me. There's my commands again, parroted. Everything I type on this host is keylogged. And again, this over here, this report is just my user ID's output. So this is where I'm configured in SSH-COM. And these are the services that I added in STN-COM. Again, if you ever have questions about this stuff, we're happy to help. You only have to set it up once, and then you really don't have to worry about it again. The only other issue that we run into here is the fact that every user has to be configured for this. You have to configure users to use the new services. If you have 100 users in your environment, they will not be set this way. You have to go through and set each one of them this way and this way if you want them to use these services. The other option you have is to do a add to system users like. I think this is a handy one. We do this. We configured a specific user that's not log onable. Add to system users like. There we go. So we set up a user that has all the default values that I just showed you. And then all of our users that get added after a certain point are added just like this user. This is a template. And that user has its configuration set up just like this. So from now on, anybody that logs on to SSH gets this profile and looks just like me. Again, happy to help you set that up if you ever need help. Anytime, anywhere. So once again, we have everyone set up. Let's go see how big our logs are. Here's where my audit trail ends up being. Let's go see how much data we generate in an XAC audit trail on a regular basis. And remember, these systems have quite a few users. So that file is currently 13.4 meg, right? Let's see what else is in that subvolume, because we keep all of our audit trails, all of our audit trails for XAC there. So since the 10th of September 2020, we're on our third audit trail. And that's with keystroke input for everybody and keystroke output and input for sensitive users. It just doesn't generate that much data. You'll see it going by here. Like I said, it does not consume a tremendous amount of space, and there's no overhead. You can see on here that this is running. This is a system utilization. It's relatively idle, even if I'm doing up info. So that's logging this whole time. And what's busier than anything else is SSH, not me. And it's only because I did something silly. And SSH has to encrypt all that data as it's coming back to my screen. So that's all. Low overhead. Yeah, like I said, nobody else feels it. It doesn't have any impact on anything else. It just works. So here's the access control entries for an audited tackle under SSH and an audited corn shell under OSS. Again, I'm happy to help you set this up and configure it in your own environment anytime, whether it be for a demo, for a test, or for production. We're here for you. I went backwards. Okay, so what it comes down to is why not audit everything, right? If you find out that you have too much data over the long term, you can always ratchet it down, but there is no impact. This may be required for your compliance. It's simple to configure, and it has no adverse effects. Log your keystrokes. Like I said, nobody has to look at this. Nobody has to be worried about your input. There shouldn't be anything personal or private on the NonStop when it comes to your operations staff, but there may be a substantial amount for your users, your customers, right? So log this stuff. You can always go back through the reports later. You can always see what's going on, but chances of you finding anything that's, like I said, embarrassing or anything like that are slim to none. This will save you time, money, effort, and stress when it comes to your audit. And it might help in other ways as well. Operational efficiency, things like that. It's not difficult, and XAC has so many other functions and features that it's a good product. Period. But I like it for the keystroke logging. So you can reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to help with any NonStop security related issue that you might have, questions, concerns, whatever. XYPRO is always here for you when it comes to security in the NonStop, 7x24, whether that be sales, support, or otherwise. If you need anything, just call us. My email address is right there. Go to the website, register, get some information on the other products we have. Once again, we're available for questions, parties. You know, we dress up like clowns and do kids stuff, all that kind of stuff. If you need anything at all when it comes to NonStop security, reach out to us. At that point, or at this point, I should say, I guess we're going to open up for questions. And thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it.
Hi, everyone. Rob, thank you for that. This is Steve Churchian, and we do have a couple of questions. So, Rob, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So, first question, if I don't already have XAC, how long does it take to install and configure XAC for keystroke logging?
Less than an hour, and that's if you don't know what you're doing. If you want our assistance, we can probably have it up in 20 minutes.
Okay, so it's a relatively simple setup, and even simpler with our help.
Yes. Again, all this is documented. You can if you have no experience whatsoever and you're willing to read the manuals, it's all out there. Like I said, if you need a quick fix and you really are nervous about it, we're happy to help at any time.
Okay, great. Second question is, can I keystroke log only certain users?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. We can configure keystroke logging by connection, by user, by service, by command. It's really up to you. If you set keystroke logging up on a service like Telnet or SSH, it's going to log everybody who comes through that service. I take that back. That's only true for Telnet. With SSH, we can turn it on or off by user. But yes, the granularity is there. And if you have a specific solution, you need to know that this individual is always keystroke logged. We can make sure that happens. Yes.
Sure. And in today's world, if you're not already using SSH, there's bigger problems to solve there.
Agreed.
Okay. Third question is, can I generate alerts or actions based on keywords in the keystroke log?
Yeah. And a lot of customers do this. You can trigger on literally anything that comes in or out. So if someone types purge, log on, drop, some sensitive keyword in your environment, that data can be triggered on the NonStop or off the NonStop, right? SecurityOne, our security intelligence product, is smart enough so that if you do a certain number of keystrokes in a certain order, it will jump up and say, we think there's a threat here. Someone typing purge or drop is not a big deal, but if someone does log on as super and then tries to purge a certain object, we want to know about these things, so we want to trigger a different alert. So yeah, we can, like I said, we can trigger on anything that comes through the audit trail. That might be input or that might be output. It might be based on the subject user ID or the time of day. It really doesn't matter.
Right, and that's a very good point regarding XAC, keystroke logging, and Security One, because for us to be able to have data to provide context of what's happening on the system, obviously one of those main sources are the commands that are being issued on the system. So this component of XAC is absolutely critical for every environment for a variety of purposes, not just what Rob explained with being able to track user activity, be able to prevent errors that might happen on the system, like his example with almost dropping a production database, but then having those keystrokes to see the sequence of the commands being issued are critical to providing context of what's happening on the system.
Yeah, context is certainly key, especially when it comes to a platform like the NonStop, where things are just a little bit different.
Yep, and you can do all kinds. Once you have that data, the amount of analytics you can do to it are limitless. We do have one more question. Is the input displayed only after enter is hit?
Yes, input is only input if the command is actually sent to the NonStop. So if I type fee, fi, fo, fum, but then I backspace over all of it, it's not really input. It's just me typing without actually sending it to the host. So yes, you have to hit enter. You have to actually process the data for it to be captured.
Okay, great. And then not really a question, but a smiley face. So Rob, really appreciate the time. Thank you for that. And we'll see every one of you at the next webinar. So stay tuned, check our website, www.xypro.com, and we'll be posting our next series of webinars there shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.